Interim model of Russia, Russian Interindustry Model, shares its general structure and many features with the other dynamic interindustry models. Built with the Inforum software, I will describe today the most important changes in the model associated with the updated statistical database, and mainly focus on calculating of capital investments and household consumption. RIM has 44 sectors and has a new statistical database and series of input-output tables extending from 1980 till 2015, both in current and constant prices. They consisted of the system of national accounts and were made by Marat Uzyakov. The estimates were based on Russian input-output flow tables and current prices, and estimate definitions as published by Rosstat, the Federal State Statistics Service of Russia. RIM also has a new updated extended statistical on energy sector, energy balances extending from 1990 to 2016, made by International Energy Agency. And based on this data, the new energy sector block was developed by our colleague Andrei Kolpakov. This block includes calculation of final consumption of all energy sources by industry, agriculture, transport, services sector, and residential sector. RIM has also a new statistical database on household consumption expenditures in classification of individual consumption by purpose for 24 items plus net purchases abroad for 2011-2016 data. These data were published by Rosstat in last August as a part of national accounts, Russian Federation. Also, on the basis of a detailed used table of goods and services at purchases prices for the year 2011, a bridge matrix was developed that allows to transform from consumption expenditures on products and services in classification by purpose to 44 items. 44 items of expenditures by industries in national classification, harmonized with the classification of economic activities in the European community. With the new data, the new coefficients were estimated for personal consumption functions in the PET system. The form of this function is there. Okay, it's on the top, where X is consumption per capita in item E. In constant prices depends on product of additive part containing the real expenditures per capita and its change, and product of relative prices. Thank you. And product of relative prices raised to the degree, and namely E-item price related to overall price index, E-item price related to all the other items prices, and to its group price and subgroup price. The S is the share of expenditures to item E in the base year. It's in our calculation, base year is 2011. Four groups were highlighted. It's food, clothing and footwear, health and transport, and two subgroups, proteins in the group food and personal transport in the group transport. We should estimate this system and to find the unknown parameters B, C, lambda, mu, and nu. The problem is too short time period for estimation it's extended only from 2011 to 2016, and only 6 years. This problem is because of transition of national accounts from SNA 93 to SNA 2008. The coefficients were estimated by our colleague Vadim Potapenko with the use of programming language R, and then these coefficients were put into the RAIN model. And finally, personal consumption depends from prices, real expenditures per capita, and our estimated parameters. The prices in the RAIN model calculating according to the Leontief price model, except for free infrastructural sectors where prices are regulated by government. It's natural gas extraction, electric gas and water utilities, and transport and storage. In those sectors, prices are exogenous. According to our forecast, the personal consumption grows at about 1.3% in the nearest 4 years, and then its growth accelerated up to 2.4, 2.7% on average. And even with this not so high dynamic, the personal consumption in two industries, food, beverages and agriculture, exceeded its saturation level. We have in the model, in our model, we have exogenous vector of saturation level. It based on the USA data in accordance with the international comparison of GDP by purchasing power parity by countries for the year 2014. And so the personal consumption exceeded its saturation level, and we think that to improve our calculations, we should take into account the different behavior, different income groups, because in our country we have very high income inequality. Additionally, in the model, we have possibility to use alternative variant of calculating personal consumption. It based on the logistic functions, where personal consumption asymptotically approaches to the defined saturation levels, and this variant was in our previous version. And where logistic functions were estimated with the help of nonlinear regressions. The capital investments in the model in each industry use the capital replacement in the industry, the current and two-legged values of the first differences of industry peak output, change in total outstanding long-term credits deflated, the variable we call fear, where by long-term we mean for a period more than 3 years, and variable representing profits in the industry. One could see that the share of long-term credit in total, its blue line, increased rapidly since 2002. And then after crisis, 2009, its growth was slower from 2010 to 2013, and then it accelerates again in 2014. And after next crisis of 2015, this share of long-term credits in total stabilized at about 52-54 level. And one could also see that the change in credit, this red line, increased rapidly also after crisis in 2016-2017. What else happened in the crisis year? In 2015, we see that the loans, that the interest rate on loans to non-financial organization up to 1 year, the green line, exceeded the interest rate on non-financial organization over 1 year, and then these rates were almost equal most period of time during the 4 years. And also the overdue loans level increased in 2015 from 4-5% before to 6-7% after, and it's even in this year still growing. The industries sectors with the most high overdue loans level, it's sector of construction, about 22% by July of this year. Wood and products of wood, 14%. Wholesale and retail trade and repair is by around 12% of overdue loans. Food products, 10.3%. Agriculture, 9.6%. And real estate, about 9%. Real estate and business activities. Here's the structure of banking credits to residents, and one could see there that the main borrowers are real estate and business activities. This is the upper one, and trade, wholesale and retail trade. These two sectors borrow about 30% of total credits, and we see that the share of trade decreased in 2015, during crisis of 2015. Also, the share of construction there gradually decreases. The share of transport and communication and agriculture remains stable at about 6.5 level. The share of manufacture, it's there between people. Sorry. It's there, takes about 25%, 1/4 of total banking credits, and the main recipients of credits there is transport vehicles and equipment sector, metal and metal products, chemicals, coke, petroleum products and nuclear materials, and food. Another main borrower is mining, except of energy-producing materials. And there is a rather big share that defined like other activities, but we have new, more detailed data published. But this data more detailed, but much more short. They began from July or January of last year. But if investigate this data, one could suppose that this share remaining like other activities is mostly financial and insurance activities. Having new statistical data, we estimated the investment equations. One should say that the coefficients on the first differences in peak output were softly constrained to maintain the capital output ratio in the industry, and profits variable was softly constrained. The fee variable, that is the change in long-term credits, wasn't constrained, and proved quite helpful, is indicated by its Maxwell, shown on the right. With the new data, the Maxwell of credits variable grew up for the sectors textile, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, ferrous metals, machinery, and automobiles and highway transport equipment. It remains rather stable for food, ships, airplanes, railroad equipment and repair, construction, trade, hotels and restaurants. And for all the other sectors, it's rapidly went down. And even for 6 more sectors, the coefficient before long-term credits turned out to be negative. And so in these sectors, this variable is not used. With the newly estimated investment equations, we see the growth of investment is, according to the model, is 2.8% in the nearest 4 years, and then it slightly declines up to 2.5 and 1.9 in the last 4 years of the forecasting period. The personal consumption accelerates its rate from 1.3 to 2.4, 2.7, and in this inertial scenario, the matrix of coefficients, the E matrix of coefficients, mostly remain exogenous and stable, except for some sectors. Among them, automobiles and highway transport equipment, the coefficient flows to this sector, changing, and the coefficients from trade, transport, and communication also changing, and this result will be presented later on Friday by our colleague. The inertial scenario also assumes the growth of oil price from 65 to $73 by the end of the period, and this influence the ruble exchange rate, and so we see the continuous reinforcement of ruble exchange rate in the whole forecast period. This results for the growth of import share in the consumption, the share of import in personal consumption, blue line, and import share in investment, green line, growing, but it doesn't reach its peak level of 2012. The share of import in intermediate consumption exceeded its peak level, and it's reached about 14.7% by the end of the forecast period. With this dynamic of import shares, we see the growth of import accelerating from 2.8 till 5.1, and so the GDP grows at about 1.6% in the nearest 4 years, and then in average 1.8. In the structure of GDP, we see that the growth, the share of investments remains mostly stable. It's there. The share of personal consumption increases, but almost reach its pre-crisis level. The share of government continued to decline, and the share of export continue to grow. Thank you.
Now we have 5 minutes or so to receive the comments or questions. So, again. Yeah.
Asiya, can you open your forecast of last slide? No, not figures. Yeah. At Institute of Economics, we made a lot of forecasts, And if we have, I mean, Russian economy has economic growth, usually growth rate of investments in fixed assets is 2 times higher, sometimes more, as compared with growth rate of GDP. So therefore it's, from my point of view, quite strange ratio between GDP growth rate and growth rate of investment in fixed capital. Just my comment. Thank you.
Very small answer. First of all, is it inertial scenario of Russian economy? In this scenario, you have the stable share of investment in GDP. Current share of investment in GDP about 21%. And about 50% of Russian GDP goes from personal consumption. And you can see that GDP dynamics very close to dynamics of personal consumption. Yes, it's inertial scenario. Of course, it's a scenario with very hard budget policy. You can see negative dynamics of government consumption, and these very strong budgetary and monetary policy create these dynamics. From my point of view, it's absolutely correct.
Yes, just a small explanation. In the first period, the fall of the gross investment in fixed capital is 5 times the fall in GDP. So the base is for the next year are a lot lower. So growing faster, it doesn't mean that it's growing larger. Okay, it's just that the base for the next year are smaller, because in the previous year the fall was 5 times the one that the GDP. So that's normally when you have a recession, it's happening. The one that fall the most is the recover faster also.
Other?
I have just a curiosity about the second column. You have the GDP growth 1.4%, but if you look at the personal disposable income, you look at that number is negative, and I would like just to know why you had that kind of results.
Okay. As for the second column, this is the actual. This is the actual.
Yes, I would like
figures.
just to.
Yes, I will tell you that you mean the personal disposable income. Yes, minus. What we see in the last years, we see the sharply slowing down of rate of savings. It's very strange, because if you, it's not strange, but it's like this. Only a few years ago it was 10%. Last year it was 0.7%. So there is no savings. All that population have it's just consumptions. The growth of credits and the slowing down of savings, and in total we see the situation of minus of incomes, real personal disposable, and the.
Okay, but my question was about why do you experience? Did you experience a negative growth in the personal disposable income during a period of growth of GDP? You have something like a higher level of unemployment. You have what is the reason behind that negative number? Why you had minus 1.7 for disposable income.
Okay, this is the actual statistic. It's already.
I think the main reason
use savings.
Yes, I would like to say that we have the declining of savings, and that's why even with negative dynamic of personal incomes, we have positive dynamics of consumption.
The main reason of negative personal disposable income is rapidly drop of
labor income.
Yes, and distribution incomes to the business and government from population. And finally, we have situation that we have negative dynamics of personal disposable income in 2015 and 2018, but we have the positive dynamics of household consumption. Two reasons. The first one, recovery of consumption after dramatically drop of consumption in 2015. For example, Russian car markets dropped down for 20–30% for 1 year. And next reason, the positive dynamic of household consumption is credits. Because the first half on previous year in 2018 was positive dynamics in wages. First of all, in budget sector. And people look this situation is high income, go to the bank and get more credits. And finally, we have 5-year negative dynamics of 5 years of negative dynamics in personal income and maybe 2 years of positive dynamics of households. It's of course it's a very strange situation.
And what about the unemployment rate?
4.7 only.
Stable?
Stable, yes.
And what about taxes?
Yes, we have the flat taxes for personal income, 30% if you have $200 per month or maybe $1 million per month. We have 30% of flat rate. Yeah.
Okay. One more question more. Nikki?
Well, it is very interesting forecast, but what policies stay behind this? Because I see that government consumption goes down, or not goes, yes, really goes down, and personal consumption, well, Professor Shirov commented it, but nevertheless, is it a change of the model of the development, not mathematical, of course, because the changes are very drastic, and inputs increases faster than input. So the national savings go down. Could you comment this?
Sorry, you mean the second column?
No, the total dynamics. Yes, of course. One of them. Also, it also about the government consumption. It is very serious.
What about government consumption? We have in Russia budgetary rule. If oil price more than $40 US per barrel, all additional income go to the reserves and not go to the government consumption, budgetary expenditures. And of course, in this situation, we have stable budget expenditures in current prices. for long-term period. Of course, it means negative dynamics of budgetary expenditures in constant prices. Absolutely clear. Second, about export and import. The positive dynamics in export in this forecast period show the recovery input consumption after 25 drop down in crisis period. It's only recovery. But if we speak about export, it's a result of our restriction in raw materials sector. So.
Okay, let me see you.
One comment.
One last comment. Oh, you add some?
Well, about the budgetary rule, do you believe it will not be changed?
Of course, but it's an inertial scenario with current condition of economic policy. We have flat condition of economic policy for all forecast. Of course, we have another scenarios, no problem. But in this scenario, it's absolutely stable economic policy.
Okay, last comment.
What are you assuming about sanctions? You say it's business as usual, so you forecast they continue, or is there any hope you can get out of this mess?
The Russian answer for sanctions was we have more and more reserves. And budgetary rule is our answer, not our Russian government answer. Though situation with trade and economic relations with the United States and European Union. But from my point of view, it's not a good idea, because for last 2 years, oil prices increased in 60%. In previous maybe 10-15 years, we have very high correlation between oil prices dynamic and GDP, government consumption too. But in these 2 years, we have 60% growth of oil prices and about 2% increase of Russian economy. Finally, we have another way with Russian economy and oil world trade market. And finally, result of sanctions on Russian economy is not so big. Our sanction inside Russia, not outside.
Central bank sanction.
Yes, central bank, and you can see the government dynamics of government consumption. From our understanding of economic theory, the government could get more money for economy in the period of economic crisis. But we have the absolutely another situation, and finally we copy of some elements of policy from European Union, from United States, from developing countries. But finally we have more and more problem in our structure of economy with income of population and so on, so on, so on. But government not use the reserves and money for economic development and solve the problem of Russian economy.